Welcome to Basically a Therapist, but without the degree. I'm your host, Lauren Larson, and thank you so much for being here. As you can tell by the title, in today's episode, we are talking about divorce. And before I get into it, I want to preface this episode with this. I have been divorced, and I do not condone divorce. The point of this episode is not to encourage anyone to get a divorce. It's to show how God worked through and used something so painful and not within his original design or plan to bring about a deeper faith and wholeness. Divorce is not something that people typically set out wanting to have happen in their marriages. And, as believers, we also have that other layer of knowing that it's not God's original design for marriage. But what I do know is that God is a redeemer and he can bring beauty even from the ugliest, most broken places. And I know there are people going through divorce that are going through it not because they want to, but because they have to. Maybe it wasn't their idea or it wasn't their decision, but it's just what they're facing right now. So today I want to talk about how divorce, although painful, can become a place where God makes things better, not because divorce is good, but because God is good and he works everything together for our good. Can I get an amen on that one? So I don't want to gloss over or pretend that divorce isn't heavy. It is. It is so heavy. Divorce it's a loss. It's the loss of a covenant, the breaking of something that God designed to be lifelong. And despite how our culture tries to brainwash us about marriage, it is designed as a covenant. It's not just a contract. It's not just a piece of paper. It is something that is supposed to be sacred and binding and spiritual. And divorce, it represents the breaking of that covenant. And the reality is that is heavy. Whether you wanted the divorce or not, that is still something heavy that you're carrying. And even when divorce is necessary, acknowledging that the covenant has been broken helps validate why it feels so heavy. And in addition to that, it's also the loss of your dreams. It's the loss of the picture you once held together of growing old together and these family moments of what forever is supposed to look like. It's the loss of maybe Christmas looks different now. Maybe you have to split holidays between your ex and they have the kids some holidays and you don't have them some holidays. Or maybe it's tense now, or maybe it just looks very different and that's heavy and that's hard. And it's the loss of identity of our routines, some of us financial stability. And with all of that loss comes grief because it feels like a death. And in many ways, it is a death. Many of us go into marriage with a picture of the future of kids and shared holidays and traditions and growing old together. And divorce completely strips those dreams away. And it quite literally forces you to build something different. And it's not just that the marriage ends, but the expectations and the dreams of how your life was supposed to play out. And, this is especially hard when kids are involved and step parents start coming into the picture, et cetera. And I've talked about this from a stepmom's point of view back in season 1, if you're interested in that. But I understand, divorce feels like a death because it is. And it's also the loss of the picture you thought your life would look like, right? There are days when maybe the silence in the house is louder than anything else. And maybe there are moments or nights that the loneliness is so freaking heavy. And then maybe there are moments where the enemy tries to get you through shame, and all you hear is that you failed. And maybe you're in that right now. Maybe you're feeling that, and maybe your heart aches when you see families together, or when you see couples together, and maybe you're wrestling with anger and betrayal and hurt, and maybe you carry regret for choices that you've made or even didn't make. And if that's you, I want you to know that you're not alone in that pain. You know, there's an identity shift, right? Of, I thought I'd be this person's wife or husband. And part of your identity is stripped. And then there's also just a social loss too. Friendships probably will change. At least that's been my experience. Family relationships may feel strained, and maybe you were really close with your in-laws and now they hate you. Now they won't even talk to you. Like, they won't even return your phone call or your text messages or anything. And even the way that people see you can change. People will take sides, and it's a hard reality, but it's just the way that it is. People will hear one side of the story and jump ship. People may not even give you the opportunity to share your side, and you may be made out to be the villain. And I have a little side story that I wanted to share on this one. In my first marriage, my husband at the time and I had what I thought were best friends, right? They were another couple, and my ex and I would get divorced, and the wife of our friend group and I still stay in touch, right? We text, she reaches out, she would check in on me, etc. And, once the divorce was finalized and everything, and I had started dating my now husband, but my boyfriend at the time, I wanted to introduce her to him, right? And she had told me that, she wasn't ready. And I was like, that's fine. I respected that, whatever. Because, divorce is hard for everyone, like all parties, especially couple-y friends, right? Like friends that you're just couples with, and or couples that you're friends with. I said that wrong. Whatever. You know what I'm trying to say? People like other couples that you go out with and travel together with or go to dinner with or whatever. And then I'm on Facebook not long after, that text conversation with her. And I see that she's been hanging out with my ex-husband and his girlfriend. And also that she would babysit for them. And I was like, what? So, not only are you grieving the loss of marriages and dreams and expectations and whatever with your spouse, but you're also grieving the loss of friends and friends that you thought would be your besties forever. Yeah, it's hard. It's so hard. And a lot of times with that comes grief and shame and judgment, especially if you're in the church. And if you've grown up in church like I have, you may know just how scary going through divorce is. I think nowadays, divorce is much more common. So maybe the shame and the judgment around it are not as bad these days. But with me being the first person in my family to get divorced and growing up in the kind of church that I did, it was terrifying to even announce that we were getting separated. And then maybe you have people who give you their opinions or try to fix your situation. Like, hey, maybe you should try this, or this helped us when we were struggling, and tell you how you're not doing enough or you're not doing things right or whatever. And, as my therapist says, should is a form of shame. And so all of that is hard, and it's heavy, and it's a lot. And I don't want to downplay that at all. I have been through it. I have sat through it. I've gone through it. But I want to take a few minutes to share my testimony with you, if that's okay. Not that you really have a choice. And this could be a little hot take, but as difficult as divorce was, I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all. I look back at that time in my life. It was 12 plus years ago now, and I'm so thankful for it. I was a mess, and I do mean a capital mess. I was caught up in sexual sin and looking for approval and identity in anything or anyone other than God until December 4th of 2013, when God brought me quite literally to my knees and lovingly and very firmly convicted me. I refer to this moment as my Saul on the Damascus Road moment. And I'm pretty sure I've talked about it before in season 1, but I was in the process of packing an overnight bag to go stay at a guy's house that I was seeing. My estranged husband at the time and I were probably separated for 5-ish months by that point. I'm not really sure. And I'm walking out of the bathroom and putting stuff into my like overnight bag, and I literally got convicted and fell to my knees. It was like the Holy Spirit took over my body and I couldn't move for like a little bit. And I started bawling, and my sister came running in, and I told her what was going on. She had no idea what was going on. And I worked up the courage to cut things off with this guy after my sister had drove me over to my friend's house. And it was from that day on that I, not in a formal way, but definitely recommitted my life to Jesus. The pain that I felt of him stripping away my desire to control, my identity, my everything, was one of the most painful times in my life, bar none. There were so many tears shed, so many lonely moments, so much pruning and removing. And it was one of the hardest seasons of my life. But what I can also say is that it was the most beautiful time of my life. And I don't say that to be dramatic. It was the most beautiful time of my life. I look back at that time and it's like, it's not even bittersweet. It's just sweet. Like, yeah, I remember the pain, but it doesn't, like, the sweetness of that season far outweighs the pain that I experienced. And it was so worth it. Like, it was just beyond worth it. I was literally stripped bare of it all. And it happened shortly after the time that my parents moved across the country. And about 2 weeks later, when my sister that was living with me to finish out her senior year of high school left to go visit my parents, and she didn't come back. Like, literally, she just didn't come back. I had to like pack her boxes and her room up and like ship everything to her. And I was just like, that was a rough time. I remember reaching out to random people to ask for prayer. And the scripture, Psalm 34:18 rang really, really true in that season, where the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, because I learned and had such a dependence on God that I had never had prior to that season. And I've been a Christian since I was 6. And at the time I was, 26, 27. So let's say 20-ish years of being a Christ follower, being a Christian. And that was the first time that I actually experienced a relationship with God in my entire life. Because before that, it was about following the rules and making sure I don't do this and don't do that, and checking the boxes and looking the right way and sounding the right way and acting the right way, when my heart was a mess. And that became very evident because God exposed wounds and patterns and unhealthy dynamics that couldn't be ignored anymore. And from that pain, I was able to minister to others during that season. And still to this day, I'm sharing my testimony now. And it knocked me off my high horse, and it equipped me to be able to empathize better with others in pain. And my story ended up becoming a source of hope. And I want you to know that the same can be true for you and your story. If you find yourself in this season right now, your story can be turned around for good. It can be something that turns into hope for others. It can be your message, your ministry, your something, right? There are people out there in the same role as you and you may not be ready yet, but even if you just share what you're going through, like knowing that they're not alone can be really helpful for them. And I'm so thankful for this time, because I think through that season, I learned that God, He doesn't run away. He doesn't run away when you're in the ugliest, grossest, most sinniest part of your life. He actually runs into it. It's like, you think of like firefighters, right? Like they are running into the fire and everybody usually runs out because that's logical, that's normal. And our God just runs into the fire with us. He doesn't run away from us. And he was my constant and obviously still is, like, duh. But it deepened and strengthened my faith in God's promise that he will work together everything for our good. And that can be found in Romans 8:28. And I often go back to that verse. And I wholeheartedly believe that he works everything together for our good. And divorce didn't make me better necessarily, but God made me better using divorce. That's for sure. He does that, like he uses our mistakes and our poor decisions, and no one is thankfully too far gone from God for him to be able to redeem and to use. And I'm living proof of that. And he can and will do the same for you if you allow him to. If you let him in, he will do the same for you. God's hand is in your story. He can provide peace in the midst of chaos, and he can use your pain for good. And you may not feel it or see it now, but he can and he will. Like, I absolutely promise you that, because I've seen it way too many times in my own life to think and believe anything differently. Like, I just literally can't believe anything differently anymore. And I do want to add a little caveat here that, God didn't erase the consequences of my decisions just because I repented and returned back to him, right? Like, my consequences didn't just get wiped away. Like, I still had to deal with the fallout of the choices that I made and the actions that I took. But he was so kind and he was so gentle and he was so loving. And he walked through those consequences with me, and he showed me love in spite of what I did. And that is something I can never, ever forget. Like, that's just how good our God is. Like, he gives us the free will to make these stupid decisions sometimes. And he'll also like sit with us while we deal with the consequences of our decisions. And that's love. That's love. Not rescuing people from themselves, but letting them face the consequences of their decisions. That's love. And my last thought here before I close is, God will replace with better. And I don't want you to hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying trade in your spouse for another. I'm not saying if you don't feel like you're in love anymore to just let it go and find something better, because you take yourself into every relationship that you go in. And if you don't deal with you, and if you don't deal with the issues and stuff, you're just going to rinse and repeat. What I am saying is that if you found yourself in this position, if your marriage is ending or it has ended, if you've lost your quote unquote friends, if you've lost a lot, I wholeheartedly believe God will redeem that. Maybe not with the same group of people, but he can provide new people, healthier people, more loving people, kinder people. For me, I found my now husband, with whom I'm about to celebrate 10 years of marriage with next month, and a whole new group of people with whom I finally feel like are actually real friends. And, if God can do it for me, if he can do it for me, honey, he can do it for you. Before we close, I want to speak to the person listening who feels maybe stuck in shame. Maybe you replay the mistakes that you've made, or you're carrying the weight of what was done to you. Maybe you feel like divorce has put this like permanent mark on your story. I want you to hear me clearly. Your story doesn't end with divorce. You are not disqualified with God because of divorce. He has not abandoned you. And yes, the covenant may be broken, but his covenant with you, his love towards you, never will. Where you see ruin, He sees an opportunity to rebuild. And I just want to pause and I want you to ask yourself a question. Like, what has God been trying to grow in me through my pain? What is God trying to teach me about me through this pain? Maybe it's resilience. Maybe it's compassion for others. Maybe it's a deeper dependence on Him that you've never had before, which is exactly what I experienced and more. But I want you to know that pain isn't wasted in God's hands at all. Like, He will never waste pain. So if you're listening today and feeling like your divorce is maybe the final word, I want to leave you with this. Divorce is not the end. It is not the period at the end of your sentence. It is not the end of your story. Your story continues. Redemption is the final word. God has the final word. God will still write your story if you allow Him to. Grace wins. Love wins. Jesus wins. So let God write that story. Let Him show you what is possible if you trust and believe in Him. And trust that even in the brokenness, He is making all things new, including you. I don't have my Bible with me, and I don't have my phone with me either, but how terrible of me. Give me 1 second, because I actually do want to look this up. Isaiah 61:3. It says, and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of His splendor. Love that. And then 2 Corinthians. We are doing this in real time right now. If I can type. But He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest in me. I love that. And then, like I said earlier, there was Psalms. I think I said 34:18. He is close to the brokenhearted. And then He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. That's so good. God is so good. He's just, I don't know, guys. He's just really good. But before I leave you, I want to provide some practical tips for you. And this is what I did when I was going through my separation and my divorce. So the first one is to journal. And now I'm not someone who reaches for the journal often. I am not a big journaler, but I journaled hard during that season, probably because I had nothing and no one. Like, I like the idea of journaling in theory, but getting myself to actually do it is a different story. However, it tremendously, and I do mean tremendously, helped me while I was going through it. And every now and then, this is my favorite part, every now and then, I will take out my journal from that season and I'll read through it. And I love to do that because it reminds me of what God has brought me through. It allows my current self to look back and reflect and remember God's deliverance and His kindness. And it's just interesting to see how far I've come, like reading those journal entries to like right now. Thank God. Literally, thank God. And then another tip here is to pray. Like, obviously this is probably like a duh, Lauren, like obviously pray, but I really, really, really struggled with letting go and surrendering control during this time. I was I was a control freak, like massively. Um, yeah, there's just no two ways about it. I was a control freak. And there were so many text messages that I wanted to send to my ex, or ask people to reach out to him, to talk to my ex-husband, to like give him, like a good old guilt trip or a good old talking to. And I was just tempted to play God and get in his way. And I'm so glad that I didn't. But I had to pray to God so much, like so much. Sometimes it was every few minutes where I would literally try to take back control and start thinking about texting him again or texting somebody else and be like, hey, if I texted so-and-so, maybe they'll text him and then he'll like want to reach out to me and like work on things or like whatever that was. It was an actual mental, emotional, and spiritual battle, sometimes minute by minute. But man, oh man, was I so close to God. Like the intimacy that I had with God was insane. It was amazing. He and I talked a lot that season. a lot. And then lastly, and I'm probably always going to suggest this, but go to therapy. Therapy got me through that time in life. It's getting me through this time in life right now. Find a good therapist. And if you need some suggestions, I can try to help you. But processing through my junk was so good, and bringing awareness to how I showed up and why, and all of that was absolutely invaluable. So find a good therapist to help you walk through this season. And thank you so much for tuning into Basically a Therapist, but without the degree. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this message with anyone that you think it will encourage or help that's going through something like this. And I will talk to you next time. Bye. Yeah.